If you talk at people instead of with them, you are killing their ability to learn. Let me explain. Most of the groups that are gathered are still done in a very old school fashion, meaning there is a teacher or a sage on the stage that is speaking passively at an audience or a group of students. Think of your typical college or high school environment where there's a teacher at the front of the room speaking at the students. We want to break this mold, especially if you're someone as a community steward or as a facilitator of any kind or a change maker who's actually looking to create transformation for your audience. You have to learn how to help them digest and absorb the information that you're teaching. Yes, cue in the active learning cycle. At Exchange, we teach this model. We have multiple specific questions that we design to help unlock the creative potential in groups. We also teach specific choreographies, which is essentially how do you design for groups to come together to interact, those interaction patterns inside of live events, live gatherings. What I want to teach you though right now is simple 3 steps for the active learning cycle so that you can help bring your content to life inside of a room and move from that passive teaching old school methodology to one that's more active learning so that the people, again, your participants, your students are actually taking action on what you're teaching about. So here you go, active learning cycle, 3 steps. First and foremost, you want to ask an engaging question. Ask an engaging question. So if you have, again, if you've spoken for like 10, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I would actually argue if you're speaking for more than 20 minutes, that's like a really good, I'd say like a red flag moment to stop and integrate one of these active learning cycles, which is asking a question like, what is the one thing, try to keep it simple, you most want to appreciate about what was just shared? It could also be, what was the one thing you want to remember to remember? Remember. What this does is it breaks up, again, your speaking and creates an opportunity for the audience to digest what you just shared and make the learning their own. So what is one thing you want to appreciate? Let's say you have a panel that you're bringing in, right? Any kind of passive where people are just sitting back and receiving information. If you want to pause and invite them to appreciate, or again, what's that one thing you want to remember? Or it could also be the greatest lesson. What is the greatest lesson, insight, aha, nugget of wisdom? Pause and ask that question. Second step in your active learning cycle is you want to allow them to reflect. So don't just ask the question and move on. I've seen other facilitators do this. You actually want to create a moment of pause. Invite them to sit with that question. Maybe you want to invite them to grab something to write with and something to write on if they're in person or virtual. Give them a moment to reflect. Now, bonus points if while they reflect, you play some music. Nice, calming, grounding music. I highly recommend music with no words because that could be distracting for your audience, or just in silence. But music also helps create a moment to reflect. And then the key here for the active learning cycle, now that you've invited a question, to pause, allow them to absorb, remember the one thing that they want to most take away. They've reflected on that question, and then you allow them to share their voices. Again, we teach more of the details of how to actually facilitate this inside of Exchange. But when you bring in the voices, it could just be, if you're in a small, intimate group, hey, I would love to hear from 1 or 2 of you. What was the one thing that you wanted to most remember inside of that? Don't ask a different question here. Ask the same question that you asked up here. You're essentially inviting them to share their voices either to the whole room, or if you want to have them turn, if you're in person, hey, turn to someone next to you. Go ahead and share that one thing that you most want to remember. And guess what? You're going to also be receiving the greatest value that the person next to you also receives. Now, maybe you have 2 things that you get to take away and walk away with. But if you think about any groups or seminars or, I take part in a lot of personal development conferences. We don't necessarily walk away remembering everything. What do we most walk away with? The things that we journaled on, right? Or the one thing. So what this really also supports is helping them integrate and have a clear understanding of one thing that they get to walk away with. And then when you bring those voices into the room, now everyone's like, oh yeah, that's true. That was a golden nugget. And they're probably writing that down too. So this is a really important way, again, if you're speaking for more than 10, 15, 20 minutes, to pause, ask a question, give them space to reflect, give them space to, again, digest and receive what you've shared, interact with other people, or interact with the whole room. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Looking forward to any questions that you might have or your opportunity to integrate these active learning cycles into your facilitations. If you're curious to learn more about Exchange, I've got links in my YouTube channel here. And of course, feel free to subscribe for more wisdom bursts on community building, emotional healing, the inner freedom work that we all do, the inner work as facilitators and community stewards. Looking forward to being on this journey with you. Thanks, guys. See you soon.